Hey guys, did you know that I have 3 college degrees in science, but in all of those degrees, I was never even given the opportunity to take a class in the philosophy of science. And that really shocks me because the philosophy of science is extremely important in understanding how science works. And so, as we go through physical science, I think the first thing we need to do is begin thinking about what are some of the basic structures of how science is developed and the way it works today. And we'll begin with something called the scientific enterprise. What is it that science is attempting to do? And what's fascinating to me is that science is developed along the same line as we've developed in our life. For instance, when we were very, very young, when we were infants, the first thing that we began doing was exploring the world around us. Everything around us was new and exciting. Everything had to be touched and tasted and handled and so on. If you have children, you know what I'm talking about. And so with that exploration, that beginning of knowledge, the beginning of science, we begin to classify and categorize. We begin to put things into their specific boxes. And we discovered that there's a language that does that, and we would want to know as children, what is the word for that? My children use the term dat. They would just point at something and say that. They wanted to know what is that, and so you would say that's a car, that's a train, that's a refrigerator, that's a chair. So we began to put names to these different types of things around us. So we begin with exploration, which naturally and logically moves to classification. We classify the things around us, and then once we have all these names, these things around us, then we want to know how it all fits together. Can we build a story? Can we connect those different things into some kind of coherent logical framework? And that's often called abstraction. So we begin to develop abstract stories that help us fit the world into a nice, understandable narrative. Also, if you have children, you know they like their stories, and they like you to tell the same stories over and over and over again because it creates security in their world. And then last, once we develop these stories and we begin to comprehend the world around us, then we want to change it. We want to manipulate it. We want to see what we can do with the world around us. And so after abstraction comes invention. And we begin inventing things. Children begin to use things for their own purposes. A toilet may become a wash basin, or a pair of underwear a hat. Which brings us to the next phase, the phase we're in now in terms of our development in modern science, and that is there such thing as forbidden knowledge? Is there something that we should not know? Is there something we should not do? Not that we can do it, but should we do it? And so we're beginning to move into different ethical issues now of purpose. That's what we are looking at in the future. And the history of science has followed this similar progression. You begin with the explorers in the 16th and 17th century. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It wasn't just Columbus, it was others, De Soto, De Vaca, Magellan, that began exploring the world around them. And they began collecting things and bringing it back and putting it in museums. And they began asking the question, what is this? How do we classify it? And so we have classifiers. Carl Linnaeus began classifying the different life forms that were brought back. Arduino began to look at the different rock types that were discovered, the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary. And so we began to put things in their boxes, so to speak, and develop classification schemes. And so science is also moving from exploration to classification. By the 1800s, by the 19th century, we begin to develop stories to fit those ideas into coherent frameworks, into narratives. And so you have Neptunism, where the belief that the Earth was once covered with a vast ocean, and Arduino's rock types begin settling out. First the primary, second the secondary, and third the tertiary, and so on. And there were other ideas, other theories that were developed at the time. That's when we began to see the nebular hypothesis of how the solar system developed. And we see Charles Darwin was his theory of biological evolution. And so we began developing narratives, origin stories of how things came into be, how they work, the theoretical sciences. So from exploration to classification to abstraction, and we shouldn't be surprised then to see the 20th century as an age of invention, when we began to take our knowledge of the world and begin to make life more comfortable, more useful. And that raises the question of what is this century going to be all about. And as I said before, it's the same with childhood. We will be considering the purpose, not just the meanings and things, but what purpose do they serve. And we're already beginning to see that in terms of the atomic bomb, different aspects of genetics and bioengineering and so on. So that's something to think about as we look at the scientific enterprise and how it's playing out in the past and in our own lifetime.